Hey everybody, this is Don again, and it is time for episode 46 of Practical Reality. It's actually a Wednesday afternoon, which is highly unusual for me. I made the Thanksgiving video on Thursday, the short little Thanksgiving wish for everybody, and I actually thought of the content I wanted to do for this video on Sunday, and I came to the park all ready to do it, and then I realized it was a little bit more subject matter than I normally deal with in my videos. A lot of a dense subject matter, and I needed a script. So I went home and wrote the script, but by the time I was done with it, it was dark. So I couldn't come back down to the park, which is where I like to do the videos. So here I am on Wednesday with the script ready. I'm going to try to make it look like as if I'm not reading off the script so much, but I am going to refer to it. And this content of this video is inspired by a post I saw on LinkedIn probably like 10 days ago now. It was a photo of a scene from The Godfather, and there was a caption there. The photo comes from the scene in which Don Vito is holding the meeting of the heads of the five families to try and restore the peace after his son, Sonny, was assassinated. And the caption on the photo reads, "Real power is silence while you watch snakes act human." And funny, the quote is actually attributed to Tony Montana in Scarface, which of course is Al Pacino playing Scarface. I left a comment underneath that post, and this is what I said. What's really disturbing about this post is that it points to a sickness, the tendency that some people have to glorify and make role models out of characters like these. It happens so easily when the characters appeal to your basest, meaning lowest instincts. It clearly demonstrates the importance of personal development so that your sights are set higher when you look for people to emulate. And that comment itself got, something like 400 or 500 impressions, meaning a lot of people read it. I didn't get any responses. I'm hoping that I actually provoked some thought in some people. But that's what I said. So after I left that comment, that sort of brought me to a wider realization about the topic I wanted to discuss today. And that topic is filtering your influences. Deciding what you let into your consciousness on a daily basis. And to give it a full examination, I first want to go back to the basics. These days, it's a pretty widely accepted medical fact that babies absorb everything around them. While they're laying there sort of kicking their arms and legs and crying and expressing themselves in the only way that they know how, they are absorbing everything that goes on around them. They really have no other choice. The world is a new place for them. All kinds of sensory inputs, easily overloading the baby's capacity, but they are still paying attention to everything. Then, of course, a couple of years go by, and the baby becomes a functional toddler. And then the focus shifts towards how that child reacts to its environment. And that's what parents deal with. What's sort of forgotten about at that point is that the baby has absorbed everything that it's seen and heard. And then as the child grows older and older, it becomes more about the child adjusting to the world around it. But I think what's important to realize is that the process, even as a child grows into an adult, the process of absorption and observation does not stop. That is going on. In fact, it probably gets sharper because as the person grows older and matures into an adult, his senses get sharper. So it is more than likely true that the person is still absorbing and observing everything around them subconsciously without actually realizing it. So those influences are still there, no matter whether the person realizes it or not. So then you have to ask the question, what kind of power do those observations and absorptions have on the ability to influence the person who is absorbing them? Now, there are those out there that would say it has no effect whatsoever. I happen to disagree with that. I think it has a tremendous effect. Given all that we have learned about how the mind works and about consciousness, you have to recognize that your influences are there, whether or not you choose to acknowledge them or not. And so right now what I'm going to do is break those influences down into categories. And I'm going to start with TV and movies. Then I'm going to move into music. And then I'm going to talk about social media. So let's go back to that scene in The Godfather I was talking about for a second. If you love the movies like I do, then you've probably seen The Godfather. And if anywhere near my age, you've probably seen The Godfather a bunch of times. I must have watched it like 15 times, easily. And in that scene, you see these men sitting there acting like power brokers. And I'm sure that for some people, that sends a very powerful message that makes them want to mimic these people in some way. So your brain has developed over the course of your life some built-in biases. So you may never actually be aware of how much those images affect you. And then you have to apply that principle to whatever else it is you watch on TV. Can you watch your television and be aware of how the images you are viewing affect you? Have you ever even given that a thought? And then the larger question that you have to ask yourself is, do those images that you regularly take in help you present yourself to the world in the best light that you can? Do they help you become the best person or the best version of you? And if the answer to that question is no, then the next question is the sacrifice worth it? Now, it has been part of my spiritual journey towards awareness to realize to at least some degree what type of influence those images were having on me. And that knowledge didn't come from some epiphany I had. It came from research and listening to videos of other people who are concerned with the same subject. So the end result is that I now shy away from watching TV and movies that feature violence as a main plot point. I also have stopped watching the nightly news. When is the last time you saw something on the nightly news that could be classified as good news? For 20 minutes, they assault your senses with everything that happened during that day. Do you feel the need to watch that news so that you stay informed? If I look at the collection of movies that I have on my DVR, I would have to say that at least 70% of them feature some pretty extreme scenes of violence in at least some way. The most common element of movie and TVs these days is that they feature violent content. And if you want to think about it on a different level, think about NFL football. Why is NFL football the most popular sport? I think it's because it's the most entertaining, and the reason it's the most entertaining is because it's the most violent. And the best part about NFL violence is that it's controlled violence. Someone is supervising this violence. Even though you might not think the referees do a great job, they're out there supervising that violence. So you don't have to feel that bad about watching it. But I definitely still think the potential is there for even that controlled violence to influence you in some way. Think about this. How many times have you heard of attacks coming, people throwing fits and attacking people because their team lost? I know I've seen dozens of examples of that kind of thing. So when you see incidents like that, you really can't deny the fact that those images that you are seeing on that screen have some influence on you and other people. Maybe you don't get that angry right away, or maybe it just builds up in your system slowly and comes out at a later time, whether in appropriate or inappropriate fashion. So let's turn our attention to music. Now, I grew up listening to music in the 70s, which is far, far different than the music of today. And the main reason I don't really like the music of today is that it's not very challenging. The music of the 70s had challenging lyrics and challenging rhythms. The music of today is mainly made by machines. And it's very catchy, and that's all it's meant to be. It's not really meant to challenge the listener. It's just meant to be popular, which in my opinion is the antithesis of the reason you make music. But the one advantage of today's music for people who listen to it is probably that it's not as harmful as the music that I listen to. 70s music was far more challenging on an intellectual basis and a musical basis. It had, like I said, complex rhythms. It had much more intricate lyrics. It dealt with some very serious subjects. And it also features some very violent or sexist type of content. So you have to think to yourself, again, if you're listening to that for years and years and years, what kind of effect does that have on you? That has to have some sort of effect on you. Some people will say absolutely nothing. Some people will say maybe a minimal. Some people will say a great amount. I'm not sure where I fall on the subject. We know, of course, that these hearings were held years ago about these lyrics, and it was concluded by most people that the lyrics don't have any effect on anybody. But I disagree with that. I think there has to be some sort of long-term effect, whether or not you can actually recognize it or not. Now, I have a playlist on the Pandora app that's almost 400 songs long, and many of those songs are the 70s music I grew up listening to, and they feature these sexist and violent images, and I listen to them. But is this now the only music that I listen to at my tender age of 64 years old? No. I counterbalance it, and this is what I'm talking about for everyone. If you're going to be listening to that kind of music that features negativity and violence and, thoughts about suicide and these kind of things, you have to counterbalance that. And the best way that I do that is with classical music. And I've listened to many other forms of music, of course, but classical music is the one for me. And I discovered classical music when I was about 25 years old. I saw the movie Amadeus, featuring the life of Mozart, a fictionalized life of Mozart, and just the recognized ability that Mozart had to compose all these pieces for whatever it was, an entire orchestra, which features like 20 different instruments, just blew my mind. I was like, you got to be kidding me. No one would even try to do that today, okay? No one would even attempt to do what Mozart did, writing it down on a musical staff, instrument by instrument, hearing it all in his head before it was even played, before it was even down. Nobody does that today. Nobody can even come close to that today. So his talent is immeasurable and far, far above what there is out there today. So when do I listen to classical music? I have that around when I'm working. It's great concentration for working. If you're not doing anything that requires, too much like creative thinking. If you're just doing busy work, this kind of thing, bam, have the classical music on. It helps pull you through. Busy work can be boring work. It can be, stuff that makes you feel like, slow. Keep the classical music on and it hums along. In the shower, to raise my mood. In the kitchen when I'm cleaning up the dishes, or cooking something. It's great stuff. Classical music features some beautiful melodies, and if you listen to them closely, you will hear, as a rock listener coming to classical music, you will hear a lot of melodies and harmony and stuff like that is featured in classical music. In rock music, the two cross over, in other words. You're going to hear stuff in classical music that was written 200 or 300 years ago that has now been incorporated into rock and roll songs. Probably some of the ones that you love. So it's not that far a distance between the two. Music is sort of evolutionary. What happened then is the influence on what happens now. Maybe not as much on, the modern music being made today by machines, but when people were still playing instruments to make music, the influences were there. And those influences are good influences. Classical music is inherently beautiful. It adds a certain ambiance and atmosphere to any situation that you play it in. It immediately calms you down. It immediately makes you feel like life is a wonderful thing. That's at least the way it makes me feel. And if you give it a try, I think you probably would feel the same way after a while. If you ever sit on the beach and listen to a Mozart piano concerto or a Beethoven symphony and listen to the waves crash onto the shore at the same time you listen to his music, it's like being connected to the past, to the eternal, and to the present at the same moment. It's like a spiritual communal experience. It's a wonderful thing, and it makes you feel so calm and so alive and grateful. And I think that's extremely important. So that brings us to the subject of social media. And this is probably the toughest subject to talk about. For me, also, I am not as negatively affected by social media as young people are. That's why it's tough for me to talk about, because I don't really see the negative effects of social media that much. But I do know that they exist. And for anyone who has felt like they've been harassed on social media, there are ways to combat that. You don't have to view that kind of content all the time. And I also know that as a young person on social media, it's almost inevitable that you're going to see content that is disturbing, That's just the way the platforms are set up. That's the way the algorithms work. They bring you content that they feel is going to appeal to your basest instincts and hook you on it so that you want to come back and back and back and keep watching it. And it becomes habitual, an addiction almost. And that's very dangerous. So again, how are you going to counteract that? There are ways, okay? One thing that my wife and I do is watch nature programs. I think that anytime that we don't watch a basketball game or, some particular TV show that we like, or there's not a good movie on, we turn to nature documentaries. And nature documentaries are awesome. They really feature the beauty of the world. And it can make you feel as if you are not in yourself. I don't mean like a drug high. I just mean sort of like you can just identify and become more calm by identifying with the beauty of the world that's being shown to you. And I think that's really important. And I think that when you do that, you inherently begin to rewire yourself. You give yourself a break. You take yourself away from the stresses of the world and you allow yourself to view this beauty and happening in real time. Now, I also recognize that there are some violent images sometimes in these nature programs. And how do I reconcile that fact? Usually, when you see like a wolf killing a mouse or something like that, or, a cheetah killing a gazelle, this kind of thing. Well, what they're usually doing is for survival or to feed their babies. Okay, so I'm not necessarily call it a noble purpose, but there is a purpose to it. It's not senseless violence. There is a purpose to it. These animals have to kill to survive. It's the pecking order of, the species of the earth. So if they're bringing back food for babies and this kind of thing, that's almost an affirmation, a beautiful image that is life affirming. So that's why that doesn't bother me that much. You see it happen. Did you know that there's some purpose to it? It's not like, the content that's shown on social media to harass people. It's not like, movies like Lethal Weapon that, are 2.5 hours of just like fights and gunfights and fires and explosions and all this other kind of stuff and beating people up. That's not what it's about. So being able to separate yourself in that way, to take a break from the stresses and the content on social media that is disturbing, it's a very positive step. And it's incredibly important to do and be able to filter what comes into your consciousness on a regular basis. And if you do that, what happens is you'll be able to separate yourself. You'll be able to create some space in your own mind to understand that what you're seeing is not everything that's out there and is not something that you need to be absorbed by. You can take in and absorb other things around you that have an effect on you that is much more positive than the images you get presented on social media. Now, for me to say that, my watching of nature videos is the only way to combat the negative effects of social media is ridiculous. There are probably many other ways. Involvement with friends and this kind of thing. Getting out and do positive activities like sports or, taking a walk or, being creative, writing poetry like I do, or, writing whatever, fiction, anything that makes you happy, anything that takes your mind off of what you're being fed is a good idea. So I think that's something everyone should consider who's on social media and sees this kind of content. Just be able to try to recognize that it's not everything. It's not what the world is really about. It's a small, isolated corner of the world populated by some very sick people who have some very bad thoughts. And they're just trying to make everybody feel as miserable as they do because they have no self-respect whatsoever. Keep that in mind as well. So the last thing I want to address in this video is, remember this. If you are going to be an adult who takes full responsibility for what they're feeling and, how they act with others, then you have to be accountable for everything you say and do. And you have to realize that nobody can make you feel anything that you don't allow yourself to feel. Okay? Now, if you misunderstood that, let's say it again. as an adult, you are responsible for all of your feelings and everything that you do. No one can make you feel anything that you don't want to feel, that you don't allow yourself to feel. So if you are going to develop the internal control to be a measured and calm and collected person and present yourself to the world the best way you can, the best version of yourself, that means that it only makes sense to try to filter the influences, the stuff that comes at you every single day, and gain some measure of control over that. By doing that and realizing the things that you see for what they are, the negative influences out there, the stuff that's thrown at you, the senseless violence, the harassment, seeing that for what it is and stepping back from it to exercise your ability to change the influences, change the inputs of what you see every single day. That is going to have an effect on you over a long period of time. And that's going to make you able to achieve the internal control that I talk about in every video and be able to present yourself in the best light as the best person you can be, the most productive person that you can be, and the person who makes the greatest contribution to society. So I hope everyone enjoys this, gets something out of it, and leaves comments. And I always enjoy, obviously, likes and subscriptions. You have a great day. This is Don, and it is episode 46 of Practical Reality. I wish everyone peace, prosperity, and happiness.